Friday. Today I have Meghan West with me for Mavens of Manufacturing. How are you, Meghan?
I'm wonderful, Megan. Thank you so much for having me today.
It's so great to have another Meghan who almost has a similar spelling to my first name because I've seen so many varieties of how to spell it, and yours was very close to mine. So it's really cool to start emailing you and seeing that similarity between us. I always say the best people to know are named Meghan.
I completely agree.
So, can you start off with a little bit of background information about yourself and let us know who you work for? Because Mastercam is on your LinkedIn and they're very well known in manufacturing. So, can you tell us a little about who you are and what you do with Mastercam?
Absolutely. So, Meghan West, I am the CEO and president of Cnc Software. And Cnc Software is the maker of Mastercam, the most widely used CAM system in the world. We have been around for the last almost 38 years now, servicing the manufacturing industry and essentially creating toolpaths that run CNC machines. And I'm just so happy to be a part of it. I've been in manufacturing essentially my entire life. But Cnc Software in general is just a really magical company, and it's something that I'm so proud to be part of.
So, how did you start out in manufacturing and engineering before you came on with Cnc Software?
Sure. So my father actually started the company 2 weeks before I was born. And so I essentially was born into this and, just was always surrounded by manufacturing my entire life. And my dad's previous life before Cnc Software was that he was an applications engineer. He would install CNC machines and he ran them as well. And so he always had a shop. We were always, kind of around cutting and just, it was just part of our life. And so dad started the business, the same year that I was born. And it was just something that I was always really interested in, both on the manufacturing side of things and on the people, on the business side of things as well.
When you were growing up, did he do a lot of discussions with you to kind of sway you into the sector, or was it something that you just followed him around and picked up as you go?
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of discussions. He was always very careful not to influence me in terms of, trying to force me into it or sway me into it. But he was always very attentive. If I showed interest, he nurtured it. He took the time to talk to me about the things that he was doing at work. And I did show an interest. I was really interested in all of the things that he was doing. And again, it was understanding the technology and using that for my science projects and, different things growing up. But it was also understanding what it took to start a business and really, adapt and evolve and keep it running. It was just kind of fascinating to me. And so I asked him questions all the time, and he was always really excited to spend that time with me and talk me through it.
So, what are some of the challenges that you help manufacturers solve through Cnc Software?
Any challenge that you can think of. I mean, that's the best part about Mastercam, about manufacturing in general, is that it's not specific to any one thing, any one industry, any one application. I mean, anything that isn't grown on a tree or grown out of the ground is manufactured essentially. And so, whether it's aerospace or medical or consumer goods, I mean, there are just so many things. And, I think if you think back to products that were developed before the introduction of CAM, the design was very simple. And that's because there were limitations on what could be manufactured. And so every day we are able to solve these challenges of, okay, we can design it. Now can we manufacture it? And, we've completely blown the lid off of what those limitations are. And that's something that's really exciting.
I think some people within the sector take that for granted. Just because you can necessarily design something doesn't mean you can really manufacture it, because there's so many different things that you have to consider in terms of like tolerances and materials and weight. And yeah, it's easy to put something on a piece of paper, but when you actually have to build it, you can run into those complications. And that was something that I learned early on when entering manufacturing, because I always had to talk to engineers and then manufacturers, and I didn't really right away know what the difference was. And then they're like, well, yeah, sometimes they make our job hard, but then manufacturers would say the same thing about design engineers. Or like, they just make our lives difficult. Like, they think we can pull magic out of our hats sometimes, and we can't create that because just the specifications are too difficult to design.
Yeah, I mean, think about products that we used to utilize back in the 80s compared to today. I mean, back in the 80s, you'd have these boxy telephones, right? And that was because before automation, before multi-access, you were kind of limited by XYZ and what you could, input into the machine in a very simple fashion. And so there were kind of it was a box. It was very much limited in terms of what you could design by what you could actually create. And that's changed so much in the last 30 years.
Right. And right now there's a lot of conversations around automation and robotics. So is there any like part of that, those new trends that are coming out that Cnc Software fits into, and how does it fit into all of that?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, we led that trend. I mean, automation is what we do. It's what we've always done. It's creating a language or, instructions that a machine, essentially a robot, can follow. And so, we were kind of at the forefront of that. I think obviously robotics has taken that to the next level, and it's so exciting to see the things that they can do. But I think it's all a part of the same thing. It's how do you create that automation? How do you make it easier for somebody to accomplish a certain task? And so, yeah, I mean, we pay very close attention. We've got great partners that are on the robotics side of things, and it complements very much what Mastercam can do.
So one of the biggest challenges facing manufacturers today is, of course, the skills gap. And we had a previous conversation right before we scheduled this conversation, and you said that, the exposure part is missing. And I thought you had a lot of interesting insights on how manufacturers can do a better job to expose themselves. So can you maybe touch on, what are some of your thoughts and what ways manufacturers can expose the opportunities that they have in terms of, prosperous career pathways that they offer to people?
Yeah, I mean, it's that typical cliche, if you see it, you can be it. And if you can't see it, you don't even know that it's an option to be. And so I think that's where we really start out with manufacturing, is that unless you're in the industry, unless your parents are in the industry, there's just this kind of black hole in terms of what it is. It's like you're either in the club or you're not. And I think we need to open the doors up to people that haven't been exposed to it and give them an understanding of what the opportunities are. And because I think when you think about manufacturing from an outsider's perspective, it has a very specific image. And I don't know that image really has been updated the same way that manufacturing has been updated. If you go into shops these days and understand the projects that they're working on, or really the different types of careers that are available to you to be able to work on those projects, I think it completely opens up the mind of people. And so we do a lot of things because I think it's early exposure as well. It's not even waiting until high school. We've got Girl Scout troops that will come into the office and, get a chance to see the machines running and see what that's all about. We do job shadowing for middle school and high school. We do tours of the building for different schools in our community. And I think that's the other piece of it, is improving the skills gap is not about doing something on a global or even a national level. It's grassroots. It's got to start from your community. I think we have such an ability to impact the people around us that, that's kind of our responsibility. And we've taken it very seriously, and we've done a lot of things to, to kind of get people that are in our area as exposed to manufacturing as we can.
I think that's a great point too, because even though it's a national challenge for all manufacturers, each community has to really focus on what their needs are in terms of that skills gap. Because, one community might focus mostly on additive manufacturing, while another community might need more welders or something like that. So what are those challenges that your local community faces, and how can you tie everything together. Like, how can you connect the schools with the manufacturers? How can you connect the manufacturers with the students and also the parents? Because I think a lot of parents have a big misconception too on what manufacturing is, because, my parents, my dad, he was part of the era when manufacturing started to take a huge downfall. And the community that I lived in, we had 4 major manufacturers, and all but one of them really like completely shut down. And then the one that did stay open, they cut like their workforce up to 50%. So it was really detrimental. So, when you're trying to lead your kids on a pathway of success, you don't want to go into a sector where there might not be stability. And I think we need to change the mind of parents as well too. So has CNC Software had specific conversations with any parents about what is available in this sector, and how have those conversations gone?
So that's a great question, and I think we have, but probably not enough. It's something that we can always do better on. And you're right. I mean, parents have a certain perception, and I think it's how they define success for their children, and maybe that needs to be changed. It's that a 4-year college, while it's great for so many people, it was something that I did, and I'm so glad I did. But it's not the only way to define success. And so we've had, again, with the Girl Scout troops, their parents have come in. We've had conversations with guidance counselors, because they are a really good avenue to parents, and kind of a good ambassador for the manufacturing industry if you can get in front of them. So those are some of the things. We've partnered with a company called Edge Factor, and they create content specifically for parents that they can get introduced to manufacturing and understand what the new opportunities are. Because you're right, their perception very much comes from, when manufacturing was offshored to other countries, and the instability of the manufacturing industry within the United States. But that has changed so much, and dare I say, the foundation of our country is really built on manufacturing. And if we can't figure out how to solidify that and make sure that it's secure, then that could be a general issue for our country. But I think and that's where that tie comes in nationally, is that nationally we are facing a skills gap. But where you bring it down locally is the fact that in each community, the skills gap might be a little different based on the manufacturers that you have in that territory. So, the Northwest is pretty heavily aerospace populated. We've got automotive in the middle of the country. You've got medical in some areas. And so that's where, if everybody takes a individual responsibility to get it out to their community, imagine the impact that could have nationally.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a great point. So another thing that we talked about too, and this is something that Mavens is really trying to open the door to, because ever since I started in manufacturing, there has been, a recognizable difference of how many women are involved and how many men are involved in manufacturing. And it's definitely getting better. And I'm really excited to see more and more women like yourself being part of the leadership side of things when it comes to the sector. So one of the things we did talk about is diversity in this inclusion initiative. Can you touch more on that and why it's important for CNC Software and Mastercam to get behind that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many pieces to this, and I love this conversation because it is important to me. Again, it goes back to that, if you see it, you can be it. And when you don't see someone that either looks, thinks, or acts like you, then it's hard to imagine yourself in that position. And so the more that there is diversity, and I mean across the board, not just gender, but all the different categories, I think it provides this diversity of thought that I think is critical to the innovation of the manufacturing industry. Because if you think about manufacturing, it services the entire world. And if you only have a small segment of the population driving that, then you miss out on so many opportunities to properly support and service the rest of the population. And so, I say to women all the time, we need to be in manufacturing. We need to have a voice. We need to have a presence to be able to make sure that our needs and our thoughts are considered, and that's how we make sure that products are designed in a way that not just satisfies us but wows us. And I think that's on any level, for any person, for any member of the population, it's important to have that diversity. And I think there's a groundswell. I mean, if you think about women, not just in manufacturing, but in the workforce in general, I mean, we're slowly kind of working up to equality. And I think it's just going to take a certain amount of time. It's not something that's going to be fixed overnight. But that's why it's important to kind of look at it at a two-pronged approach. And we use this for diversity and inclusion at Cnc Software, is that we create opportunities for people on one end of it, but on the other end of it, we do look to support different organizations that provide that exposure, so that even if they're not available to work for us today, they're interested and ready to work for us 5 years from now or 10 years from now. So you kind of have to build your own pipeline and then make sure that there's an opportunity when they're ready.
So in terms of providing those opportunities, even if it's, opening up the door to bring awareness of what Cnc Software is, what are some of your strategies as a company to incorporate what you do with the high schools, middle schools, and maybe some of the technical or vocational schools that are in your local community? How do you personally make those connections with teachers and counselors?
So, again, we offer a lot of just time and effort. We offer a lot of opportunities for teachers to come in and do a tour with their students, and we always make sure that there's a representative of multiple departments, that students understand that there's so many different career paths that you can choose within this industry, and I think that's been really helpful. We've done outreach with a lot of our local high schools to do that as well. There's a group in the city, our major city in Connecticut, called Girls for Technology, and it focuses on kind of the minority community in Hartford, Connecticut, and getting them interested in engineering and getting them interested in STEM, and again, kind of giving them an opportunity to see what's out there. And my hope is that these women that we're able to give that opportunity for 5 years down the road, when they're ready to join the workforce, that they might consider joining our workforce. And so it's that's kind of that. It's a long-term path. It's not something that we do just today and ignore it. It's you have to look at the end goal.
So I've been involved in a lot of conversations, and one of the topics that comes up is, when do you start trying to promote career pathways? Because when you're 5 or 6 or 7 years old, you might show an interest in something, but it doesn't necessarily you're thinking about like a career pathway. And it probably can be said, for kids that are in middle school from 6th grade, to 8th grade before they hit high school. For me, I know that we had opportunities to like experiment with different interests. So like we had a home ec class, or we had a sewing class, and then we had a tech ed class that kind of demonstrated how to use some of those soft skills and trade skills. But then in high school, that's when they really focused on, hey, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? And if you're someone like me, I still didn't know at that point and didn't really know what I loved or didn't like to do. What are your thoughts on, when is the right time, or when should we start implementing these conversations and showing kids what a career pathway could start looking like? For example, I talked to an organization in Erie, Pennsylvania, and one of the things that they do for kindergarteners is they actually have a coloring book that shows different types of career pathways. So like there's a bank, and then they have an activity page of what sort of skills you would use to count money out or develop change. And it's a coloring book for kindergartens. And then they also have like a policeman or a manufacturer. Do you have any thoughts on, how can we start earlier to really make manufacturing stick in some of these younger generations' minds?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's maybe two pieces to that. One is there really is no right time, and there's no one size fits all. I mean, for some for some student, they may see something in first grade or kindergarten and it resonates and it sticks with them forever. Or you might have someone that really isn't open to even thinking through that until high school. So I think it has to happen on a continuous basis. And it has to happen in so many different ways. There's not just one touch point that's going to work for everybody. And so I think those ideas of a coloring book that shows different pathways, I think the idea of, my daughter, I've read so many books to her about women that have become president, or women that have, gotten into manufacturing, or women, that have done this or that. And again, it's just showing her that those are possibilities. And so that's just one piece of that whole process. It's just giving them a continuous exposure to what's out there. And so, I don't think it's ever too early. I mean, as early as 1 or 2, as soon as they can see books, I think it's great to just expose them to what the opportunities are. And then as they continue to grow, continue to expose them, continue to have those conversations. Because I think there's also a piece of, you don't want to force it on them. If you shove something down a child's throat, they're going to rebel against that. I know I did. If someone ever told me what I had to do, I was going the opposite direction. But if those exposures were dropped and continuously, put in front of me, I identified what worked for me. And, I think it's interesting. I'm the oldest of 5. My father talked about business and talked about the company every day. I was the only one that had an interest in connecting with it, as I entered the workforce. And so, again, I think it's not a one size fits all. I don't think there's ever one moment that it's the right time. And I don't think there's ever one delivery system that makes the most sense. It's kind of just providing, as many opportunities as possible.
I think too, in parallel with what you said, it brings up, the point of how important mentorships are too, because if kids don't think they can do something or pursue something, again, they're not going to follow through with that. And I think it's really great that your dad was very open and talked about these. I'm actually the youngest of 6, and my dad was in manufacturing, and he didn't talk to any of us about it. We knew that he was in manufacturing because he would bring, his first job was at Fisher Price when they made the wood toys, and he would bring all that home, and that's how we were connected with that. But he and I really didn't start developing a conversation around manufacturing until he understood that I wrote for manufacturing. And then I started Mavens of Manufacturing. He's like, what's all this about? And he's like, oh, I can tell you stories. And I'm like, why didn't you talk about this when we were growing up? Like, I kind of feel cheated. But another great thing that I like too is that there's a company called KiwiCo where you can get boxes delivered to your house. And that's something that I love doing with my boys. They don't quite understand what it is, but they love building things and they're so curious about stuff. So I think you're right. Like, you have to kind of nurture that at home as well as outside of the home, and trying to figure out ways to do that it's really fun. So is your daughter interested in manufacturing and engineering, or is she wanting to pursue something else?
I think she's actually, she just turned 7 yesterday. Yesterday was her birthday. So she's young, still, just kind of growing up, but she is very creative. I can say that she loves arts and crafts. And so I think that's something that could absolutely be nurtured into manufacturing. And we use KiwiCo as well. I have 2 kids. My daughter's 7, my son is 9, he'll be 10 soon. And, I think it's something that's interesting to them. And as you say, there are pieces they don't really understand about it, but I kind of focus on the fact that in a couple of years, as they're really understanding those concepts, they will look back to those projects. And I think it will help the light bulb come on faster, because they've had the exposure to it. And it's like, oh, I remember doing that. Now I get it. And they've kind of got something tangible that gives them that understanding. And so, yeah, I mean, she loves to build things. She loves to make things. And actually, one of the things that we talked about getting for Christmas for her this year is a 3D printer, because she's always trying to make things with paper. And so I think that's a way to really get her into manufacturing.
That is really interesting. And I think what would be a great idea for you to maybe think about is maybe document how she's learning that process and film her success, because I think a lot of people hesitate to come into the sector because they think a lot of these processes are too difficult to learn. And additive manufacturing has developed so quickly, and I mean, it's so simple to do. I remember I worked at an engineering company and they were like, we're going to teach you how to 3D print. And I'm like, that doesn't sound possible at all. Like, I don't have that type of mind. And they're like, it's really easy. And I couldn't believe how quickly I picked up on the programming, and I was able to build a small tugboat. Like, I 3D printed a small tugboat, and I was so proud of that tugboat. And my husband thought I was crazy because I brought it home and I put it on display, and he was just like, what is the big deal? And I'm like, I made that. That's amazing to me, because I
And
just
there's
write
pride
about.
in that. There's
Yeah.
so much pride in taking something and developing it. So I also have to mention my son is actually so again he's in fifth grade, and he has a project at school where they have to present on something that they're interested in, and so he's very interested in surfing. So he's actually down at my dad's shop right now and using Mastercam to router out the ribs of a surfboard, and then he's gonna also router the actual entire surfboard. But his presentation is about the inner workings, how it's made, that kind of thing. But so his interest wasn't necessarily in manufacturing; it was in surfing. But to be able to surf, you have to manufacture a board, and so I think that's the piece. It's take their interest, take what they're excited about, and then figure out how to pull that into manufacturing. And it doesn't matter what your interest is, whether it's surfing, guitars, motorcycles, anything. Manufacturing is where it starts.
That's so cool. And I think anyone who's listening, if you're a manufacturing company, Megan just gave you a great opportunity for your marketing strategy on how to attract people to your company, because what is more exciting than having a kid who's not even a teenager yet, working with, CAD programming, Mastercam, CNC software, and developing something, and actually he'll be able to take that and use it, probably, like if he can make his own surfboard. So
Absolutely.
that's a great marketing strategy. I love it. Well, Megan, I just appreciate you taking time out of your day to come speak with me on Mavens of Manufacturing. And before I let you go, I wanted to see, for women who are thinking about entering the sector or might be hesitant, what sort of advice would you give to them, to either enter the sector or not enter the sector?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just try it out, and I think that's important, is you have to give yourself the opportunity. Don't limit yourself from the start, meaning, explore anything that you might be interested in. Think about what you're excited about and think about how that connects to manufacturing. And you might be surprised at how many opportunities are out there. I mean, in my company alone, we have, I think, over 20 different departments that each require a different skill set, a different interest, a different type of personality to really be successful. And so there's so many opportunities out there. It's amazing to be connected to being able to make something. I think about the fact that we are part of something that is so much bigger than ourselves. And manufacturing is something that you can really be passionate about and be proud about. And so I would say, don't limit yourself. Find out what the opportunities are, get some time to visit shops, visit different companies that are connected to it, and see what's out there.
I think that you're spot on. And I also wanted to touch on too, like right before we started the live broadcast, you got up to shut your door and just tell your daughter, hey, I'm doing an interview, don't come in here. And I think that's a great thing to know, because I think some women who thought about entering the sector but didn't because they were a mom, they have this, thought process, well, I can't do both. And you definitely can do both. I'm a prime example. You're a prime example. There are options out there, and more companies are even coming up with creative ways to help adapt the environment so that moms can even do CNC machining on the shop floor if they need to. So it's definitely a place for women. It's definitely a place for everyone. There's so many different opportunities. So just, go to your local manufacturers, ask what their needs are, and see how it applies to your passion. Is there anything else, Megan, that you would like to add to our conversation? And, if people are more interested in learning on Cnc software, where should they go and how can they connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think first and foremost, just to say thank you. I think it's so important. Again, this is one touch point that somebody might have that might pique their interest in manufacturing. And the more that we can get it out there, the more that, we can talk about it and talk about how exciting it is, the more that people will be interested in it. So I wanted to say thank you for that. And if people are interested in what we do, mastercam.com is our website. There's always job opportunities. There's information about, our CAM system and what we do. And Meghan.West at mastercam.com if anyone has questions or thoughts. I'm really excited to connect with the community and always available for that.
In terms of connecting with the community, and if anyone wants to learn what sort of training is behind Cnc software, do you offer those types of programs?
We do. We have an online training course called Mastercam University, and it kind of runs the gamut. There's so many different areas of Mastercam, so many things that it can do. So there's a lot of different training courses that are available, and I absolutely recommend taking a look.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Megan. Thanks everyone who joined us today for this episode of Mavens of Manufacturing. Have a great weekend, and I will see you again next week on Friday.
Great.
Bye,
Thank you so much.
This episode of Mavens of Manufacturing has been sponsored by Thinker. Thinker helps solve meaningful, measurable problems for organizations that change the world. Grow your business, reduce your risk at thinkerventures.com. That's thinkerventures.com.